Albany won in Regional 1. And that is where you find the number one overall seed with South Carolina. You get a look at the top half there. The Gamecocks, of course, lost 5 starters from last year, and that included the number one overall pick in Aaliyah Boston to the draft. They just reloaded. I mean, that's all they did. It may be a superfluous question, guys, but is there any team in Albany 1 that can cause South Carolina any trouble? Keep in mind, this is before we get to the Final Four, but anybody in this region, Alexa, it could be an easy no.
I'm thinking, again, the Beavers, and
okay.
I know I'm like really high on them. We're talking about them already, but they're just a tough team to play. The way that they play, they're very deliberate with the ball. They play at a slower pace, and they really get what they want out of their offense, and they're tough defensively too. And that you got that Reagan Beers matchup. You got Talia von Oelhoffen, who I think is a baller. So I think that could be a really spectacular Elite Eight game if that's what we end up getting.
If it's anyone for me, I'm going with Indiana just because they have big guards and an inside game when you look at Mackenzie Holmes, who can bang down low with that length and size that South Carolina possesses. I do think anyone that you match up with South Carolina, it is unmatched. They can wear you down with the endless rotations they can bring in, but they can match up when I look at how things play out versus Indiana and South Carolina. But I really feel like it is South Carolina versus everybody else. That separation, that gap, is very evident in the way they've been able to do it. I don't think they're better than last year's team. As you mentioned, just reloaded with that offense. They have 8 different players that can give you more than 7 points per game. And just last year, it was 4 different players. So they've been able to get different scoring in a variety of ways.
Sam, I will take the easy answer and say no.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
That nobody's going to really contest South Carolina. They got the easiest path, I think, of all 4 regions, and they deserve to. They're undefeated. They're the best team in the country. That's the way it's supposed to be. If you're splitting hairs about the difficulty of one region versus another, South Carolina, I think, got the easiest path, and nobody in that region is going to give them much interference, in my mind, before they get to Cleveland.
We'll talk a lot more about the South Carolina team again as our show progresses. They have been one of the stories all year long. A recent story has been in this Albany region, but towards the bottom of the bracket, and that would be the 2 seed Notre Dame. We saw head coach Niele Ivey announce that Kylie Watson is officially out with an ACL injury. She will not play in the tournament. It was an injury she sustained against the Hokies in the ACC tournament in Greensboro. So, look, this is not, by the way, the only team in the ACC with injury concerns. Virginia Tech also has injury concerns with Liz Kitley, but specifically Notre Dame. What does this do to them and their potential outlook on the tournament, Autumn?
I think it's tough because you look at the injuries not only with Olivia Miles, who's sitting out, how Hannah Hidalgo has been able to step up, but this isn't just any type of player that you're missing out on. Kylie Watson was their leader in blocks, their defensive presence, and also a great duo with Maddie Westbeld. So you lose a player in her, you lose some depth. They only played with 6 players in that ACC championship game. Still got the job done, but I worry about their depth and who they're going to be matched up against with the South Carolina team that we just mentioned has endless players on their bench, how that can kind of wear and tear on them going down the stretch.
Yeah.
I think the depth is going to be the end of Notre Dame. I think you just talk about next person up.
Yeah.
Well, eventually you run out of persons, and Notre Dame's about out of persons.
Yeah.
And 6 is not going to be enough. You're playing every other day. Now they were able to do that in the ACC tournament, playing every day, but it's a different feel in the NCAA tournament, and I just don't think there's enough there. Now, you're relying so much on 3 players, Sonia Citron, Maddie Westbeld, and Hannah Hidalgo. If they don't get really great games out of all of them, then I don't see them even getting to South Carolina. They were fortunate in the ACC final. In the second half of that game, Hidalgo and Westbeld scored all of their points except for a single free throw.
Right.
You can't get away with that too many games in the postseason.
So you're looking at this 7-10 matchup here with Ole Miss Marquette. Whoever wins that one, maybe Ole Miss. I mean, that could do them in.
Ole Miss is my team. They're my seed outside the top 4 in this entire bracket that I'm going to have advance. The matchup with Notre Dame I like. Now, Ole Miss can struggle to score, but the way they can defend, they're so long, they've got experience, and they did it last year. They beat Stanford in Stanford last year, so they could certainly win at Notre Dame, which is what they would have to do. I've got Ole Miss getting all the way to the Elite Eight. Sorry, Alexa, also means that they're going to get through Oregon State. So I'm taking a different tack there. But yeah, I think that Ole Miss Notre Dame game is an intriguing one. If we do get it, of course, I don't want to shortchange anybody else. But if we do get it, I think Ole Miss has a lot of advantages because of Notre Dame's depth issues.
And I agree. I mean, I'm going with Ole Miss too, and this one as a sleeper. And just betting against Ole Miss, Coach Yo, you can't do that. We saw that last year when she was able to take down Stanford. But they're running on a hot streak right now, 7-game winning streak up until LSU, who obviously I have in a Final Four team, and they won the championship last year. But what they can do on the defensive end, as you mentioned, also rebound at a high rate. The trio of players that they have are coming together so nicely when you look at Madison Scott, Marquisha Davis, also Kennedy Todd Williams. When I went to Ole Miss during the preseason, Coach Yo taught this squad how to play the Coach Yo way, and that was we defend, and how to play into their system. I think they're connected right now. I think they're in sync, and they're playing their best basketball at the right time.
Let's talk some bracket busters in this region, teams that can really mess up your bracket. Alexa, I know you have had your eyes on Nebraska. They've messed up some people's seasons already this year.
Yeah, well, it's tough not to have your eye on them after what they did in the Big Ten tournament. And Autumn, I wanted to ask you about that because you saw them firsthand, and they really almost pulled it out over Iowa. So do you think that they can extend that run for the rest of March?
I'm not mad at that. I'm honestly not mad at that. You go into double overtime with Iowa, and Caitlin Clark didn't have the best shooting night in that Big Ten tournament, but you were still able to showcase what you have versus this team. I mean, Alexis Markowski down low, my goodness, she is so tough to bang with. She's so relentless on the offensive glass. And then Jazz Shelley, she just looked like a senior that didn't want to go home, whether that was scoring at a high clip. She had 30-plus games all tournament long. She was dishing and facilitating to her teammates, making sure everyone's involved, being a floor general. They have an inside-out game that I would definitely see going far into this March Madness tournament if they can hang that and keep that momentum going into March.
You can hit threes. I mean,
that
can really take you a far way.
It was raining threes in Minneapolis, so if they could carry that into this March Madness tournament, I wouldn't be mad at it.
So obviously we like to pick upsets, right? That's always a big part of picking your bracket. Alexa, do you have a first-round upset here in Albany 1 that might strike you, maybe in the state of Connecticut?
So, well, we have to talk about Fairfield. I mean, as we're in Connecticut, and they are in the AP poll. They're the only other team besides South Carolina that has lost. Well, we can say Fairfield has lost one game on the season. South Carolina obviously undefeated, and no one else has that few losses. So they know something about what it takes to win. I do think that's a little bit of a tough matchup for them against Indiana, especially Mackenzie Holmes. We know her health status is not 100%, but from what it sounds like, she's in a better place than she was last year during the NCAA tournament. So again, I think that's a little bit of a tough pick in terms of a first-round upset, but I am eager to see how the Stags do in this setting.
Well, I went to Kennesaw State University, so I know all about the ASUN and what FGCU does to teams, and that three-point game is lethal. Coach Mezco has coached one of the best teams in the nation consistently, and they are a scary 12 seed every single year. In fact, they are the winningest 12 seed in NCAA tournament history. And last year, we saw them knock off number 5 Washington State, so I wonder if they can do it again against Oklahoma, one of the top teams in the Big 12. But they can pour it, like I mentioned, beyond the arc, but they also defend at a high rate too. We always talk about threes with this FGCU team, but they can defend at a high rate too. And one player that everyone should have on their radar is Imani Jefferson. She's came on as a newcomer, DPOY ASUN Player of the Year. She has changed the trajectory of this team and have kept them on pace for possibly another upset. They're one of my sleepers.
Yeah, Kenny Brooks is all too familiar with that Florida Gulf Coast team with Virginia Tech. Let's move on. Potential later round matchups here. I mean, I know South Carolina, you said, Charlie, has a fairly easy road here, but there's a couple of teams that are really good defensively in this bracket. Who do you like to see later on?
Well, we've kind of already touched on both teams, Oregon State, Ole Miss. Defensively, you want to see, if you're really into watching good defense and probably low scoring, that's your game. Okay. But it's good quality defense. It's not chippy. It's going to be physical, but it's still good basketball. But expect that game to be maybe in the 50s. and the winner's going to come out maybe a little bit bruised.
So again, in this Albany 1, you got your top 4 seeds, South Carolina as the 1, Indiana as the 4, Oregon State as the 3, and Notre Dame as the 2. Potential later round matchups that you'd like to see in Albany 1, Autumn?
I'm going to play off you with Oregon State and Notre Dame. I really like these 2 teams. They are some teams that came in with question marks when we first came into this season, but they have blossomed and taken over in their respective conferences. I have Notre Dame taking the edge in this one, though. I really just want to see this possible matchup between Donovan Hunter and Hannah Hidalgo. We're going to be talking about this freshman class all night, I feel like. But just seeing how those 2 go at it, this inside-out presence is going to be special.
Yeah, I think those are 2 of the greatest stars that we've seen so far this season. But going off of the Hidalgo mention, if we do get Notre Dame, South Carolina in the Elite 8, now, this is a rematch of that first meeting that they had to begin this season. Obviously, Notre Dame got crushed by South Carolina.
But they got to go to Paris to do it.
They got to go to Paris.
Hey.
I mean, you can't complain, right? But remember, we saw Hannah Hidalgo had her coming out party. She's like, I'm going to just drop 31 on South Carolina and make it look easy. And she was so fearless in that. And so it's weird because Notre Dame, we could say they're better than them, but than that game in November, but they're also more shorthanded. So I'm really curious if that is a matchup, what that would look like. But South Carolina might just be too deep and too dominant to, I don't know, maybe we'll see the same result as we did in November.
And in that game, Malaysia Fulwiley talking about freshmen had one of the highlight plays of the season right out of the gate in her career, going behind her head and laying it.
Crazy.
It was fantastic.
That whole South Carolina team has been fantastic. And again, we will talk about them a little bit later on in our show.